Omnian System, Automated Border Outpost 1D25, 1,893 light-years from Earth. June 12, 2176 AD. This is unacceptable. The Kingdom of Faria will never submit to the military control of the Republic of Humanity. Have you all forgotten that they are barely middle-power upstarts who almost wiped themselves out with nuclear and biochemical weapons 100 cycles ago? And now we're being asked to accept them as our peers and leaders? Never. They are war-hungry and immature, and they will never relinquish control once they have it. It is in their nature to subsume and control. Look at the devices in your hands that you are using this very moment and the wares in your dwellings, all made by the Republic. While they smile to your face, they strangle you with their goods and displace native economies. They are everywhere, spreading their wares and their ways, replicating like viruses and infecting worlds before we know what is happening. Even in the kingdom, our younglings eschew our high-quality goods made by our own people in favor of the cheap trinkets made by the humans. They are insidious. Our younglings play their games and wear their clothes and speak their mongrel tongue instead of Farian, and the kingdom won't stand for it. We reject the proposal to place our military forces under their command. The Farian ambassador finally finished, glaring at the assembled delegates as his chest heaved from the gasping breaths he was taking. The Vernian delegate stood up on her chair and pointed her tiny fingers at the Farian delegate as she chittered, her high-pitched squeaking easily heard in the silent forum. The translator AI came over the speakers, naming the delegate as Princess Liria of the Verni before translating what she was saying in Commonwealth standard. How dare you speak ill of the Republic and humanity? Do you know why nobody buys your goods? They are expensive and of poor quality, and you have no concept of longevity. They are shit, as the humans are fond of saying. Every device you manufacture requires a continued financial commitment to operate, and your manufacturers do not honor warranties when your products fail, which they do all the time. We saw the human goods infiltrating our markets too, but instead of complaining, it forced us to compete with them, and the humans themselves invited Vernian industry leaders to their factories to see how they manufactured their high-quality goods at such a low cost. They asked for nothing in return, and we took that knowledge they shared with us and used it to create new methods of manufacture that increased our efficiency by over 70% while halving costs. All across the board, we saw massive sales and profit increases. When we asked why they did this, the human representative said, "Competition ensures quality, quality ensures profits, profit ensures investment, and investment ensures more profits. A happy customer is a spending customer, and spending customers equals economic growth. The more we trade, the more money we both make, and the best way to become good friends is to fill each other's pockets with credits." What they said was true, and our long stagnant economy grew by over 20% within 5 cycles of opening free trade with the humans. The kingdom refused to do this, and instead of blaming the humans, you should recognize that your stupid king and his stupid protectionist policies are the reason for your self-inflicted economic depression. The forum erupted into a variety of hoots and laughter from the assembled delegates, many of them fully agreeing with the princess's assessment of Farian goods and their terrible economic policies. They also appreciated the arrogant Farian being put in his place by the diminutive Vernian, who were well known for calling things out without regard to tact. The Farian diplomat looked indignant and began to respond when the Malit-honored elder standing next to him intervened by flicking a finger and cutting off the voice projector before speaking from the speakers lining its suit. The Malit domain thanks the Farian ambassador for his thoughts. Please return to your seat. The Farian ambassador's light blue skin turned an angry shade of purple before he stormed off the stage, the forum translator AI declining to translate the Farian obscenities he was hurling at the assembly. There were more hoots and laughter of derision from the delegates, and the Farian ambassador made a rude gesture at them with his hands before sitting in his seat. Raising 2 suited hands, the Malit suit demanded order, which it got immediately before speaking again. I warn the Vernian delegate and any others against speaking out of turn again. Failure to comply will result in sanctions and the immediate ejection of those who fail to abide by the proper protocols. President Sarak of the Neo-Commonwealth will speak next. A large Nakuli male stood up in the front row and began to walk to the edge of the stage where the steps were located, his back ramrod straight as he stared straight ahead. His resplendent uniform was covered with medals and awards, all of them truly earned during his decades of service in the Commonwealth military forces. He ascended the steps and walked to the lectern with measured military precision, dipping his head slowly in a gesture of proper respect to the Malit exosuit before turning to face the delegates. His eyes slowly roamed over the rows before seeming to stare over them as he began to speak, his deep voice echoing off the walls without the need for the voice projector. I am honored to be here with all of you, and I wish it did not require such extenuating circumstances to bring all of us together in common cause. I am not a diplomat or an ambassador. I am a warrior, so please forgive me for speaking plainly. I do not know any other way to speak, and I hope my succinctness is sufficient for the occasion. To my great shame, I once thought as many of you did and still do in regards to the Republic and humanity in general. I saw them as upstarts, as the Farian ambassador pointed out, and I felt they had grown too arrogant and assured of their position within the quadrant, considering the very short time they had been an interstellar species. Sarak looked down at the lectern and lifted his powerful, scaled hands to grasp the sides of it before lifting his head again and continuing. My son Therax held a different view after consuming every piece of information he could scrounge up from the knowledge repositories and broadcasts regarding human history. They are like us, Father. The ancestors have finally sent us the ones we have been looking for. He said to me during one of our many discussions regarding the various species, but mostly about the humans. I did not agree with his opinion, and I was deeply troubled by their rapid expansion and the obvious uplifting they underwent that propelled them to middle power status far sooner than they should have been able to. They had not earned it, and the Commonwealth government as well as the High Command was rightfully alarmed. Sarak's eyes looked over to where the Zengsin, Eleani, and Republic delegations were sitting together while speaking of the humans being uplifted, before shifting his eyes over to where the Jelini and Vernian delegates were seated as he continued. I thought my son had fallen under the sway of these new arrivals to the quadrant, and I pitied him for having to find out that they were not what he thought they were when the time came for the Commonwealth to put them in their place. We wanted to teach them a lesson, and we wanted to remind the rest of the quadrant who the true power was. Despite our spying attempts, we never could manage to discern the true military might of the Republic or the martial abilities of the humans, and it was for this reason alone why we had not yet launched a punitive expedition to teach them and the others that the Commonwealth still controlled affairs within the quadrant. And then the Insectoid Empire launched their swarms again, and the Commonwealth Navy was out of position and unable to respond to the incursions in time. Do you know why this is? Looking down at the lectern again, Sarak's hands clenched the sides of the Ati, and the sound of the Zengsin ebony wood creaking within the powerful grips traveled clearly through the forum before he lifted his head again and stared directly at the human delegation. The skin folds of his snout were contorted, and for the first time, the assembled delegates saw what a truly ashamed Nekali looked like. This is no place for secrets, so I will tell you why. More than half of our forces were clandestinely deployed along the frontier facing the Republic of Humanity, and we were less than 48 solar hours away from launching an illegal surprise attack against them without declaring war as required by the Treaty of Sirius. There was a tumultuous upwelling of gasps and curses, followed by shouting from multiple delegates as they stood up and angrily gesticulated towards President Sarak in their own unique ways. Sarak ignored them all as he continued to stare at the humans, who surprisingly did not seem disturbed in the slightest by his revelations. Raising its suited hands, the Malit exosuit enhanced the volume of its speakers and demanded order several times, the decibels increasing each time until the delegates finally went silent and sat back down. The suit speakers blared much louder than usual after everyone had finally settled down, and the normally emotionless speech of the Malit voice synthesizers had a decidedly angry inflection, something only a very select few had ever experienced before. Do the delegates from the Republic of Humanity wish to respond to this disturbing confession by President Sarak of the Neo-Commonwealth? Ambassador Ray Buncombe of the Republic shared a look with President Lopez, and she gave him a barely discernible nod. He stood slowly and activated the voice projection function of the translator on his suit, before speaking directly to President Sarak. We thank President Sarak for his honesty, and we appreciate the difficult nature of this confession, as well as the good intentions behind revealing it in this forum for all to hear. The truth is, we knew you were going to attack us, and we had already positioned the majority of our fleet, which was hiding in the Horsehead Nebula, for a counterstrike through the Philippine sector as soon as you violated our borders. We were confident your task forces would have smashed themselves against our stealth minefields and the defensive networks before the remainder of our forces surrounded your fleets and destroyed them in detail. Our expeditionary forces were ordered to penetrate through the Philippine sector and head for the core worlds to destroy your shipyard facilities, and the remainder of your forces still within Commonwealth territory. Our plans changed when the insectoids invaded, and this is the reason why we were able to reach the Eleni system and prevent their extermination. If we weren't already staged for our counter-assault, we never would have been able to get there in time. We strongly believe things unfolded the way they were meant to, and the Republic has chosen to forget the actions of the prior Commonwealth government, for it no longer exists. We do not hold any grudges against you, President Sarak. We know you are a true friend to the Republic and humanity. The Republic ambassador nodded to President Sarak, who looked greatly moved by what he had to say before slowly dipping his head in a gesture of respect. Sarak waited for the ambassador to sit back down before speaking again, his voice heavy with emotion. When I was ordered to lead the illegal and cowardly attack against the Republic, I resigned my commission in protest. I wanted to test their mettle, but not in such a dishonorable fashion. I am Nikuli, not a treacherous Ominion. I was asked to come back after the insectoids invaded, and I returned to my position to defend the Commonwealth in its time of great need. You heard what the human ambassador had just said. They knew we were planning to launch a surprise attack, and they had every right to launch their own attack, but they didn't. They were waiting for us to strike first before launching their own attack, like an honorable adversary that did not wish to fight does. They could have taken advantage of the insectoid invasion to destroy our shipyards or to intercept the main fleet and destroy them as they journeyed back from the frontier to confront the swarms. They did not do so despite having every right by the laws of honor and warfare. Do you know what they did instead? They sent us an already signed Treaty of Alliance, as well as a mutual defense pact, offering to render aid to the very people who were just about to launch a cowardly attack against them. The delegates flinched visibly as Sarak yelled the last words, obviously distraught by what he was recounting. He did not seem to notice, and he became increasingly animated as he continued to speak stridently. The fools in the old government did not even have the decency to respond to the Republic proposal, too proud to acknowledge that we desperately needed their help even after half the fleet had been destroyed and dozens of worlds had been glassed. I saw the recording the Premier sent, telling our people in the periphery that they were on their own. They are dead, I thought to myself, and for the first time in my life, I was ashamed to be a Nekuli, and I was ashamed to be part of the Commonwealth Navy that I loved with all my being. Sarak stopped speaking and looked directly at the Eleni delegation, his eyes conveying the shame and regret he felt then, just as he did now. There was something else, an almost pleading quality that seemed to ask for forgiveness within his eyes as he continued. When the spy drones returned from the periphery, I was there when the recordings were played in the chambers of the Governing Council. There were 5 member species in that region of the periphery, but not all had been exterminated. I cannot even begin to describe the silence that pervaded the chambers as we watched the recordings. The same Republic fleet we aimed to destroy in a cowardly fashion not only came to the defense of one of our members that we so callously abandoned, but also destroyed the very swarm that thrashed our proud fleet like youngling toys and would have wiped out the entire Commonwealth. The Republic sacrificed over 1,000 ships and almost 200,000 humans to do what we would not and could not have done even if we wanted to. They fought like demons. They saved the Eleani, and they saved the Commonwealth that was going to attack them in such a cowardly fashion. It was only then that I knew my son was right. We finally found another warrior species like us, but in my arrogance and anger, I did not see them as kindred spirits but as a dangerous enemy that had proven they were a force to be reckoned with. Shifting his eyes back to the humans that were sitting next to their Eliani counterparts, his eyes lingered on them for a few moments before looking directly at the Zengxin delegation. When the Zengxin rebelled and seized all Commonwealth forces in their sector, a part of me understood why they did it, and dare I say, a part of me secretly respected them for doing so. However, I was still the Grand Admiral, and a larger part of me wanted to strike them down for daring to turn on the Commonwealth. So I ordered my son to return them to the fold by any means necessary and to subjugate the Zengxin. We could not afford to lose the Nenchite deposits and the refinery capacity of that sector. If we lost those resources, we would lose the ability to defend ourselves if the insectoids returned to finish us off, and we knew the Republic would not come to our aid after the disrespectful way we ignored their offer of alliance. Only 23 of the 302 ships of the Commonwealth Second Fleet returned, and I thought my son was dead, killed by the same Republic that had also chased our envoy away from the Eliani system and outright stated that any violations of Eliani and Zengxin sovereignty would be an act of war. I hated them after my son did not return, and this hate blinded me to the increasingly despotic bent of the Commonwealth government as it struggled to maintain control. There were some things I would not do, and the government knew this and hid the bombing of Filat Prime from me, as well as the other atrocities they committed to maintain control. Sarak stopped speaking and turned his head slightly before looking directly at the Gelini and the Vernian delegation, his eyes full of anguish. I wept when the news of the near extinction of your species reached the halls of the High Command, and I swore to myself that I would never let that happen again. When we detected the presence of the insectoids near the Gelini system, I ordered my daughter to go there with the entire 3rd Defense Fleet. I was willing to sacrifice her to prevent what had been done to the Verni from happening to any others. She went with her 300 ships, and I ordered her to call for reinforcements if the insectoids showed up in the Gelini system while we evacuated them. She sent a distress call, as did the Gelini government when the insectoids showed up. But the traitors intercepted the signals before they reached the High Command, and I sat in my office, not knowing my daughter and the Gelini were in danger of being wiped out. I only found out what had happened afterwards when the comm drones flashed out and broadcasted the truth to naval headquarters and throughout the entire Nikul home system before they were destroyed by the perimeter defense forces. Pausing, Sarak looked down at the lectern and growled lowly, the menacing sound permeating the deathly silent forum. There were sudden loud cracking sounds that startled the delegates as the sides of the lectern were crushed into splinters by his hands. Seeming not to care, he opened his hands and let the pieces fall to the ground as he continued to stare at the Verni and Gelini delegates. My daughter and the Gelini still lived, and my son had come back from the dead. Not because the Commonwealth fleet responded to the distress call and fought off the insectoids, but because the Republic came and fought to protect others. Again, they owed nothing to the Gelini. They had no responsibility to the Gelini, but they were there nonetheless, and they brought my son, who I thought was dead, back with them in a fleet they had given to their former enemy. They fought to the bitter end, and they sacrificed themselves for the Gelini, saving them and my daughter. Again. It was then when the truth and the whole truth was finally revealed to me and my sight was restored. I did not want to see the truth of them when they saved the Eliani, so I blinded myself with hate. I refused to see the truth of the evil Commonwealth government, so I blinded myself with loyalty. But the sacrifices made by the over 30,000 Republic warriors lifted the veil from my eyes, and I could no longer deny that the ancestors had finally sent us the kindred spirits we have been searching for ever since we went into space, just like my son said they had long ago. I rebelled against the evil government I knowingly served, and when the Civil War was over, I found myself presiding over a broken organization that was a mere shadow of its former self, on the verge of constantly splintering and vanishing into nothingness after all we had done to save it and return it to its true path. The Republic had shown time and time again that they were honorable in war, intention, and action. They are also merciful and wise, and the same hand that they raise to destroy. They also offer in friendship to those who are no longer their enemy and are in dire need. If it was not for them, the Neo-Commonwealth would have shattered, and it was their ships filled with ores, food, medical supplies, and critical industrial components that prevented our demise and the deaths of hundreds of millions, perhaps billions, of our citizens. They sent all of this without me having to ask because they are a righteous and honorable people. They are the worst enemy one could ever have and the greatest friend one could ever hope for. This is why the Neo-Commonwealth has willingly joined the Republic of Humanity as an equal partner. And this is why I vote yes to accept Republic military control over all Neo-Commonwealth forces. I hope you hear my words as one who used to hate them and as one who now loves them with all his essence. Till our victory or till our death, we stand united with our friends and allies in perpetuity. Turning to face the suited Malit, Sarak slowly lowered his head in the proper gesture of respect before turning back and walking across the stage to the stairs. In the stillness gripping the forum, his boots sounded like thunderclaps as he walked with the same military precision and erect bearing as before. Walking down the stairs and then heading towards his seat, Princess Liria scurried through the seats and intercepted him, looking like a tiny youngling as President Sarak stopped and loomed over her with an anguished expression. They stared at each other for a few moments before the princess beckoned him to come down to her. Sarak obeyed and went down on his knees, and the princess threw her arms around his neck and buried her face into his chest as she quietly chittered. The forum AI began to translate what was being said between them, but was cut off by a flick of the Malit's finger. After the princess chittered some more, Sarak nodded solemnly to her and stood up wearily, as if all his strength had fled from him. He resumed walking to his seat and finally reached it, sitting down heavily in it before staring at the ground in front of him. The Malit exosuit speakers activated, the normal volume seeming outrageously loud in the hush that followed the interaction between Princess Liria and President Sarak. A short recess is in order. Please refresh yourselves in the reception room. Our androids have prepared delicacies from every world being represented here. We shall reconvene in 1 solar hour. Do not be late. Failure to comply will result in sanctions and the ejection of any violators. The forum came alive with the sound of quiet murmuring as the delegates began to stir and get out of their seats. Soon all the attendees were streaming towards the large opening that led to the reception room, speaking together in hushed tones. Watching them from where it had been observing the proceedings along the back wall, Hrethner turned the suit towards the reception room, a thoughtful expression on its face. Wondering if there would be any baklava among the Republic delicacies, Hrethner felt its stomach growling in response to the thought as it fell behind the crowd. Baklava sounded exactly like what it needed right now, and it found itself moving the suit faster in anticipation of eating the delicious dessert. Omnian System. Automated Border Outpost 1D25, 1,893 light-years from Earth. June 12, 2176 AD. Do you think I should go over to President Sarak? He looks distraught and is not eating anything. President Lopez glanced furtively in Sarak's direction before leaning in closer. Leave him be, Ambassador. I think he needs time to process everything that has been happening, and I did not expect him to outright admit in front of everyone what the old Commonwealth was planning. And to be honest, I don't think he did either. That was hard for him to admit. Ray quickly glanced in the corner where President Sarak was brooding with a glass of human mead before nodding his head in agreement. I will defer to your assessment, Madam President. I only met him for the first time 2 days ago, but I feel like I've known him for a lot longer, if that makes sense. I find him refreshing after dealing with all these duplicitous assholes here. He is guileless, a rare thing for an ambassador to come across. I know what you mean, Ambassador. There is not a dishonest bone inside that man, and I cannot imagine what would have happened if he hadn't stepped up to lead the Commonwealth. We would certainly not be joining our 2 nations or be here trying to form an alliance. That much I do know. The President replied quietly. What of Aurora? When will she be speaking to all of us? Though there is a lot of resentment among the delegates here, they are also extremely curious to hear what she has to say. I get the distinct impression many of them care more about seeing an insectoid talk than listening to what she actually has to say to them, Madame President. The President snorted in disbelief. These fuckers better show her the proper respect or I'll give them something to talk about. she whispered hotly before glaring around at the oblivious delegates scattered around them. "Sorry, Ambassador. Aurora is my girl, and I am very protective of her. As to your question, she arrived late last night and has been resting to recover from sending her essence to help her sister fight off the rebellion. It took a lot out of her, and I do not foresee her speaking today. She is also terrified of facing so many animals who hate her kind all at once, and I have been wondering if it would be better for her to meet with small groups instead of all at the same time. I think that would make things easier for her, and I believe the personal aspect of it might allow for the others to see her as a unique individual, rather than as the insectoid boogeyman personified." Ray nodded thoughtfully, running scenarios in his head as he divided the delegates into smaller groups and thought about how to make it happen. There would be resistance from the others, and he would need help from the Malit to make it happen. Looking over to the Republic dessert table, he spotted Hrethnir's suit over there, placing a small plate of baklava into the suit receptacle. That was the second one so far, and he snorted at the sight, causing President Lopez to lean closer and ask him what was so funny. "I was just watching Hrethnir put another plate of baklava into its suit. I made sure it was one of our dessert offerings specifically for it. I contracted out the order from a Greek friend's Liria and had to finagle some favors to have it shipped here in time. She wouldn't accept money for it, but I deposited 1,000 credits into her account anyway. I consider it money well spent." The president giggled at what he said, her eyes twinkling as she nodded approvingly of his efforts to keep the honored elder happy. "Nobody makes food better than a grandma ambassador. Maybe we can trade Yaya's baklava for some more Malit tech if they like it so much." Ray laughed in response to the idea of bribing the Malit with baklava before leaning in and whispering conspiratorially, "You might be onto something, Madam President. From what Hrethnir tells me, it is a really big hit among the Malit. I think 500 pounds of Yaya's baklava for, say, one of their particle beam relays would be a fair trade. Look, it's getting another plate." President Lopez furtively glanced towards the dessert table, just in time to see Hrethnir sliding his third plate into his receptacle. She turned her face back towards him and covered her mouth, cheeks puffed out as she tried not to burst out laughing and draw attention to them. Ray almost lost it and quickly spun around, the president following his lead as they both tried their best to keep it in. The president leaned in closer and murmured out the side of her mouth, "Geez, do the Malit not get diabetes? And why am I wondering what a fat cyborg would look like right now?" That was more than Ray could handle, and he just barely managed to toggle his wrist comm and activate the privacy field around them in time before he doubled over and roared with laughter, the president joining in as she gasped out, "Why, do I feel like I am laughing at a funeral right now?" Ray knew the feeling, and he waved his hands desperately to get her to stop making him laugh, which only made her laugh harder. After a few moments, they were both giggling uncontrollably as they tried to get a hold of themselves, and Ray was grateful he had the foresight to make sure he had the privacy field function installed on his wrist comm before the function. The Malit had ensured the attendees that the forum had privacy dampeners installed that would prevent eavesdropping when the AI detected private conversations. But it would not prevent them from seeing each other. At least with the privacy field up around them, the others would only see a frosted bubble and not know what they were actually doing. "Oh shit, I haven't laughed like that in a long time," the president uttered breathlessly as she used her fingers to wipe at the corners of her eyes. "Me too, Madame President." Ray agreed as he pulled out the burgundy-colored handkerchief from his chest pocket and offered it to her. She took it, nodding gratefully as she dabbed around her eyes before folding it inside out and giving it back to him. He took it and used the untouched parts to wipe his own eyes and cheeks before placing it back in his chest pocket. "Ooh," he murmured as the president took out a makeup wand from her small handbag and examined herself in the small hollow mirror being projected from it. She toggled a selection and slowly waved it from her forehead to her chin several times before it beeped. She looked good as new now, and she offered it to him. I don't," she interrupted him as he continued to stammer. "There is a male setting. I already toggled it. Just wave it over your face a couple of times and it will freshen you up so you won't look like you have been ugly crying when you shut off the field." Keep your eyes open." He took it and awkwardly held it in front of his face, 6 inches away. She gently grabbed his hand and placed it at the proper distance before letting go and nodding. He waved it slowly up and down, feeling a strange, staticky sensation on his face and forcing his eyes to stay open until it beeped. He gasped in appreciation as he saw himself in the small hollow mirror, his red eyes now white and no obvious signs of makeup, though he looked more well-rested than he had any right to. Handing it back to her, she smiled at his reaction before putting it back into her handbag. "Are you ready, Ambassador?" "Ready," he replied before shutting off the privacy field, and the reception room reappeared all around them. Several of the groups were staring at them and looked away, trying to act bored or uninterested and failing miserably. "How much time do we have left?" she asked as she wrapped her arm around his and gently led them towards the tables. He looked at his wristcom before answering. 36 minutes, Madame President." She nodded and guided them towards the Zengxian table. "Do you like spicy food, Ambassador? The Zengxian have several unique spices that I would like you to try if you are game." He hated spicy food, but he hated disappointing his president even more, so he nodded bravely and tried to keep his face neutral. She knew he was full of shit, and she laughed lightly at his expression. "Never say die, Ambassador. I promise to keep you away from the spicier offerings. Once the heat dissipates, the flavors are quite delicious." "If you say so, Madame President," he answered nervously as they reached the table, and he stared at the wild riot of colorful Zengxian food arrayed on the uniquely shaped copper serving trays. As the president began to fill a small plate with samples for him to try, he glanced around the reception room at the others. Everyone had broken up into small groups, and he noticed a blurring effect in front of the delegates' mouths whenever his eyes tried to read their lips. It went away when he looked at their eyes or elsewhere, only to return when he tried to read their lips again. "Impressive," he thought to himself, as he tried to single out any discernible speech from the group nearest to them. He could hear them talking, but there was an indecipherable quality to their conversation, as if their speech had been scrambled. The president tapped on his arm, startling him out of his spying attempt. She offered him the plate she had made, a mischievous smile on her face that made his stomach clench with fear. "The non-aligned powers have designated Ambassador Runak to speak for them," the Malit presiding over the talk said from its suit speakers when all the delegates had finished taking their seats after the conclusion of the reception hour. Ambassador Runak stood up at the mention of her name, her 2.2-meter height making her seem extremely tall in comparison to the seated delegates as she made her way from the last row to the edge of the stage and hopped up onto it with ease, eschewing the stairs on the side. She went on all fours and sprinted across the stage with remarkable speed, shooting straight up when she reached the repaired lectern. She shook her head several times to the Malit exosuit in a gesture of respect, and waited for the lectern to adjust to her height, her head and eyes darting around the assembly. Ray smiled at the sight of the ambassador as she continued to wait for the podium to adjust, her whiskers twitching in anticipation. Her species, the Iri Shah, were one of the founding members of the non-aligned powers, and they were remarkably similar to the meerkats of Earth, not only in biology but in their mannerisms as well. The lectern finished reconfiguring to the appropriate height, and her hands went to the belt that was cinching her tunic around her waist, pulling out a sheaf of small papers from the small pouch attached to it. She placed them on the lectern before toggling the translator attached to her upper tunic, and she began to speak as she read from the prepared statements. "I am Ambassador Runak of the Iri Shah, and I am honored to peer keenly at all of you and know your sense. The circumstances that have required us to gather here are troubling, and I wish it was not so. As you all are well aware, the non-aligned powers enjoy cordial relations with the Republic of Humanity. They have always been the best of trading partners, fair in their pricing and never trying to cheat us. This we have always remembered every time we glimpse a human. Others try to steal our secrets for their own gain, but not the humans. They work with us, and they adhere to the concept of intellectual property rights, just as we do. The Republic has helped us to identify violations and thefts of our property and technology by others numerous times, even at the risk of their relations with other governments. This we have always remembered every time we glimpse a human. Ambassador Runok was staring at the Farian diplomat as she spoke of the attempts to steal intellectual property and technology. Her eyes narrowed into slits. The Farian ambassador seemed to not care, affecting a bored expression that fooled no one. The Farian kingdom and the non-aligned powers had been locked in a bitter economic feud for decades, and the kingdom's economic espionage and intellectual property theft were major reasons for the terrible relations between the two organizations. Looking away from the Farian ambassador, her eyes returned to their normally round shape as she continued to quickly move her head all around the assembly, seeming to be looking for a predator before she resumed speaking. When the Unok phage burned across our worlds and began to kill us, Republic healers were the first ones to come and help us, and their ships were the first ones that volunteered to cross the quarantine zone to bring us food and medical supplies, knowing they would not be able to leave once they went into orbit or landed. This we have always remembered every time we glimpse a human. Of the over 200,000 healers and volunteers who came to help us, 8,598 passed into the great beyond when the phage took them. 23,812 became infected and lived, but they now suffer from lifelong debilitation as a result of the Unok phage. This we have always remembered every time we glimpse a human. Because of what they did, tens of millions of us survived when they would have died. Their bravery and willingness to serve others in times of need and at the risk of their own lives and well-being showed us who our true friends are. This we have always remembered every time we glimpse a human. She stopped darting her eyes around the assembly and focused them at the Republic delegation, shaking her head at them before she locked eyes with Ray and continued. We peer at the humans here and we listen with our ears as others speak of them. We close our ears when some speak ill of them, for we know it is lies and we will not listen. We open our ears when some speak well of them, for we know it is truth and we will listen. We know who the humans are, and we know what they have done, not just for us, but for others in their time of need. When the Elayani sent their plea into the stars for salvation, it was the humans who came. When the Jelini needed someone to save them, it was the humans who came. This we remember now, as we have always remembered when we glimpse the humans here. Because of what they have done for others in the time that has already passed, we know what they will do in the time yet to come. We vote yes to submit to Republic military control of our forces. The ambassador shook her head at the Malit exosuit again before going back on all fours and sprinting across the stage, taking the stairs this time. Ignoring the varied, polite applause of the other delegates, she darted to her seat in the last row with the other Iri Shah delegates, who graciously positioned themselves in the last row so as to not block the view of others. The speakers of the Malit suit activated. The Malit domain thanks Ambassador Runok and the non-aligned powers for their thoughts on our proposal. Ambassador Kilthe of the Kilthe Dominion will address the assembly next. From all around them, Ray heard murmuring from the other delegates as they began to crane their necks and look around, greatly surprised by the participation of the little-known Kilthe Dominion. Ambassador Kilthe had finally arrived during the reception hour, and the other delegates had thought the absence of a Kilthe delegation meant they were not participating. They did not see it as unusual considering the troubled history between them and the Republic. And it was only recently that the Kilthe Dominion had been able to reach the core regions with their traders and diplomats due to their isolated location on the fringe. A large door slid into its wall recess on the side of the forum, and everybody turned and silently stared at the Kilthe delegation as they entered the forum and began to stalk towards the stage. There were 3 of them, and President Lopez tapped on Ray's arm before leaning close to his ear and whispering, Ambassador Kilthe is the one holding the scepter in her right wingtip. That is the scepter of Emperor Lixar and signifies she is speaking for him. He silently nodded to signify he heard and understood as he tracked Ambassador Kilthe with his eyes. She reached the edge of the stage and handed the scepter to the Kilthe delegate next to her before unfolding her large wings, causing the other delegates to gasp and murmur at the sight of the 5-meter wingspan. With one powerful downstroke of her wings that displaced the air enough to be felt by Ray from even 15 meters away, she easily propelled herself up into the air and onto the stage, alighting on it gracefully. Extending one of her wings, she reached back down and took the scepter from the delegate who was holding it up for her, and stalked towards the lectern before extending her wings again and bowing lowly to the Malit exosuit. The Malit returned the gesture, and they both held it for what seemed like a really long time before Ambassador Kilthe lifted herself back up. She bobbed her head low in acquiescence one last time before stepping behind the lectern and holding the scepter out with a half-folded wing for all to see as she began to speak in perfect, unaccented Republic standard. "I speak for Emperor Lixar, for I hold the scepter of Kilthe. Let all see it and know the truth of what I show. My words are not mine, but the Emperor's. Let all hear me and know the truth of what I say. I am Envoy Kilthe of the Kilthe Dominion, and I am honored to be here and to have been chosen to carry the words and intent of our Emperor. Many of you do not know us, just as we do not know many of you. This we hope to change, thanks to the ones who we used to see as enemies but now see as friends and allies. We do not see things as others do. We do not trust others easily, and we view things in terms of strength. If we can take from others, we will, because they are not strong enough to stop us. This is our way because we learned this from the time of our beginning, when the many predators of our world would steal our eggs and kill our mates. We killed them all, but we still remember the lessons of our forebearers. If we do not take from others, they will take from us. Our region did not have any others like us when we first flew into space, and we claimed what belonged to us as we expanded." She had been looking straight ahead at the back wall of the forum the entire time she had been speaking and not making eye contact with the delegates, and the ambassador suddenly zeroed in on the Republic delegation with her eyes. Ray felt his heart rate quicken at the unnerving gaze of those large, emotionless orbs drilling into his own, and for the first time in his life he knew what a prey animal must feel like when it realizes it had been spotted by a predator as she resumed speaking. "Such as it was for many cycles until we came across another that flew into space just as we did. They did not attack us, so we thought they were weak and we could take from them, because if they were not weak then they would have tried to take from us first. We tested them and sent ships into their nesting grounds, and they would send ships to block our intrusions, but they would not attack. They sent us signals and tried to speak with us, but we ignored them. We already knew enough to know they were afraid of us, and they were not worthy of speaking with as equals. We decided to take from them, and we sent a single Philadad dreadnought to claim the nesting world we wanted in their space closest to ours. We easily destroyed the few pitiful ships around the nesting world we wanted. Their weak weapons could not reach us as we destroyed them from afar, and we thought it now belonged to us. The result of that first battle confirmed what we believed, that they were weak and we could take what we wanted. We were surprised when dozens of other ships came. Do they not know their weapons could not hurt us before we destroyed them? Or did they not care? This is what we thought to ourselves as the ships came right for us to do battle. This time they did not try to fight us from afar like before. This time they closed with our dreadnought, many of them being destroyed before they even reached us. Still, they came, and now they swarmed our ship like the angry Hirtak insects do when we steal the regurgitated fructose they make in their hives. Their weapons and small ships were no match for our dreadnought, but they are sturdy and fast, and more kept coming. Soon we had many stings to our hull, and our energy reserves were being depleted as our weapons tried to swat them away. So we left, and we would come back with more dreadnoughts. Before we reached our space, our ship was attacked by even more ships that were waiting for us. Our dreadnought fought well, but soon it fell beneath the many, just as we do when the Hirtak stings one of us too many times. We were angry, and the ones who killed us and destroyed our ship had incurred a blood debt that must be paid for our honor to be satiated. The nestmates of the fallen warriors petitioned the Emperor for vengeance, and he promised them retribution as a good emperor does. And so we sent many ships to test them, smaller ships but still powerful with better weapons, and they would respond, always swarming us, always dying in large numbers as our weapons reached further than theirs. We tired of losing ships to them in this manner and decided it was time to send more dreadnoughts. The ambassador reached for a small device hanging off her harness with her left wingtip, the delicate fingers unclasping it from the harness and setting it on the lectern. She tapped on it, and a large hollow screen shimmered into view that displayed 4 separate video feeds from the perspective of the Kilthe dreadnoughts being listed on the screen. Dozens of points of light emerged from the blackness of deep space that resolved into the ships of the Republic Navy, and they closed rapidly with the Kilthe dreadnoughts from all sides, like a school of minnows attacking a pod of whales. The incredibly powerful particle accelerators of the dreadnoughts began firing, and they watched as the still distant Republic ships had their bows torn open to space, the beams drilling into the now exposed interiors of the mortally wounded ships. The targeted ships disappeared in flashes of nuclear fury as the cores lost containment, but the others grimly pressed on, executing wild, evasive maneuvers as their engines were redlined well past their rated maximum. They continued to charge at the dreadnoughts as their numbers rapidly dwindled. The ambassador paused the videos and began to speak again, her voice now much quieter and seeming almost reverent as she narrated the events of that fateful day from the Kilthe perspective. "We came back with 4 Fildat dreadnoughts, and we knew that would be enough, for only one had destroyed over 50 of their ships before. Surely, we thought to ourselves, they did not have many more, and did not wish to die in such numbers again. Our dreadnoughts returned to the nesting world to take once more what was rightfully ours and to fulfill the vow of the Emperor to claim retribution for the blood debt the Republic owed us. We did not expect them to try to stop us again, but they did." She stopped speaking and tapped on the device, unpausing the video recordings from the time index she had stopped them at. The recordings resumed, and this time she did not speak as dozens of Republic ships continued to beeline directly for the dreadnoughts. The 4 Kilthe ships were furiously firing, the invisible destruction pouring out of their turrets only seen when they smashed into their targets and the armor plating began boiling under the subatomic onslaught being inflicted upon it before the beams broke through and pierced through the outer and inner hulls. Great rents appeared in the hulls of the dying ships as hundreds of bodies were expelled along with the internal atmospheres of the stricken vessels, but still they kept running the gauntlet despite the carnage being inflicted upon them, and now they were firing their own weapons. On one of the screens, 4 damaged Republic heavy cruisers grew rapidly in size as they surged directly for the dreadnought, trailing flash-frozen fluids, gases, and bodies behind them like a bloody comet's tail. The 4 half-destroyed Republic heavy cruisers continued to fill the screen until there were sudden flashes of light and the video feed cut out. The screen next to it showed the same sequence of events, except for it displaying 3 heavy destroyers and 5 frigates ramming into the second dreadnought. One after another, the Republic ships slammed into the dreadnought at incredible velocities, the video feed shaking violently from the catastrophic impacts before it finally cut out as well. Now there were only 2 dreadnought video feeds still showing, and there were still over 20 heavily damaged Republic ships locked on ramming courses with them. The remaining 2 video feeds flared with the unique brilliance of a transition flash right before the Republic ships reached them, and the hollow screen went dark. The ambassador tapped on the device and deactivated it, the black hollow screen fading away as she resumed speaking in a hushed tone filled with solemn respect and awe. 2 of our dreadnoughts were destroyed by the ones we wanted to take from and thought were weak. They showed us the error of our assumptions, and we did not wish to fight such an adversary again until we were strong enough to destroy them fully. For the next 19 cycles, we would periodically test them and send smaller ships to violate their territory, and they would confront us and make us retreat. We would depart with our scans and plan our next violation as we continued to probe for weaknesses. We noticed an alarming increase in their technology levels during this time, and our government's willingness to engage in a war with them faltered as a result. Our people remembered the blood debt owed to them, and they clamored for retribution even as the government wished not to when we saw the new ships and weapons of our adversaries. We had expanded as much as we could in the other directions by this time, but there were not enough resources and viable trade routes to sustain and grow our economy in the territory we had, and our adversaries were blocking our access to other markets. Feeling like we had no choice, we invaded again 3 cycles ago and blockaded the nest world we tried to take before, the one they call New Australia, in the hopes of bluffing them into giving us concessions. or starting a war with our now much more powerful fleet and finally defeating them. We sent 200 of our most powerful warships, including 14 Kilthe dreadnoughts for the blockade, and they sent 1,230 ships to confront us. 1,230 warships we had never seen before, some almost as large as our dreadnoughts. They are dead, we said to ourselves when those ships arrived and surrounded ours before the transmission was jammed and we lost contact. We were greatly surprised when we received a Kilthe transmission from our fleet commander 4 solar hours later, telling us they still lived and that the Republic wanted to talk instead of making war. So we truly talked for the first time, and the Republic, our adversary for so long, graciously granted us at first 2, and then a 3rd trade corridor through their territory to allow us to trade with the others on the far side. Because of this, our economy stabilized, and the Kilthe Dominion has continued to grow and prosper thanks to the Republic. The ambassador stopped speaking and turned her large yellow eyes directly to President Lopez, bobbing her head 3 times in rapid succession before continuing. We do not forget this, and we are ashamed of the blood debt we incurred and the unjustified belligerence we held in our hearts against them for so long. When Empress Lopez invited Emperor Lixar to come to their cradle world, we readily agreed and hoped to strengthen the new peace between us and increase our joint economic ventures. Instead, Empress Lopez told Emperor Lixar of a new enemy, an enemy that kills for their twisted religion and the sick masters who demand the extermination of all others. We are angry to hear this, and we agreed to stand with our new friends and allies against all others. We have their measure. We have seen how they fight to protect what is theirs, but we have also seen the evidence of how they fought to protect others when the insectoids came to take what was not theirs. Just as much as they were willing to sacrifice for themselves, they also sacrificed for others. We see this, and we think as they did for others, they would do for us. So we shall do the same for them, for they have proven they are worthy of such consideration from us. Those who come to take from the Republic will have to take from us as well, and the Kilthe Dominion will stand wing to wing with the Republic of Humanity until we are no more, or the enemy is no more. The Kilthe Dominion votes yes to accept Republic military control of our forces. The Emperor has spoken, and by this scepter in my hand, this vow has been sanctified in the eyes of the Creator who made the egg, and in the presence of all who hear what I say now. Raising the scepter high above her head, the ambassador's eyes seemed to lose focus as she stared into the distance, and her voice changed considerably, like she'd been suddenly possessed and was now being used as a conduit. Heed me now. These being the words of Emperor Lixar of the Kilthe Dominion. Let those who choose to fight with us know they are now eternal friends of the Kilthe Dominion, and let those who choose not to fight with us know they are now an adversary of the Kilthe Dominion forevermore. Once the words had been uttered, her eyes focused again, and she resumed looking at the delegates as she spoke in her normal voice. I have nothing more to say on this matter. Bobbing her head 3 more times in rapid succession towards President Lopez, the ambassador waited for Lopez to return the gesture before turning towards the Malit exosuit and bowing lowly, which it returned. The proper protocols having been observed, Ambassador Kilthe stalked back to the edge of the stage from where she had landed on it and extended her wingtip with the scepter to the Kilthe delegate still waiting there, who took it reverently from her and hugged it to his chest. This time she lightly hopped off and beat her wings once to soften her landing before the Kilthe delegation stalked to the back of the forum and lined themselves against the rear wall, since they do not sit in seats. As one, they all folded the middle joints of their legs inwards and settled down onto the floor, their sides touching each other as they huddled closely together. Once they had indicated their willingness to remain, the Malit Elder activated its suit speakers. The Malit Domain thanks the Kilthe Dominion for attending this important assembly and sharing the words and thoughts of Emperor Lixar. We shall reconvene tomorrow at first light, and I bid you all a night of serene repose. Having been dismissed by the honored elder overseeing the talks, the forum came alive with the rustling sounds of many people getting out of their seats as the delegates began to get ready to depart the forum. Looking at President Lopez, he wondered what her plans were for the rest of the evening now that they had been dismissed. "Do you have any plans for the next couple of hours, Madame President?" She looked at him and shook her head before replying. "You, Ambassador?" "I was thinking of asking Hrethnir to finish telling me how they finally managed to defeat the Balricans after everyone else had died and the Federation had fallen. Would you like to join me and find out for yourself?" "Absolutely. Maybe what they did to win could be done again. Or maybe the mistake they made needs to not be made again. Because they are back after all this time," she replied as she rose out of her seat. Following her lead, he got up as well and looked around for Hrethnir. "I see him. He's over there with the Farian delegation," he said as he tilted his head in the direction of where he spotted them. She looked over and then turned back to face him. "Let's go save him from the Farians. I'm sure he'll appreciate that," she said with a look of barely concealed disgust. "Oh, I'm sure he will, Madame President," he agreed. She entwined her arm with his and they began to walk over to where Hrethnir was standing with the Farian delegates, his suited hands moving a lot more than usual for the normally reserved Malit. "Hrethnir looks pissed," he thought to himself as they made their way through the small clusters of delegates that were lingering throughout the forum and whispering to each other with their blurred lips. Dealing with all these people and getting the talks together was the most exhausting thing he had ever done, and he could not wait for it to be over already. It seemed like most of the powers would agree to the framework of the alliance, but talking and doing were two radically different things, and they were quickly running out of their most precious commodity: time.